Hey everyone, as you can see, I am in Terminal. I am in Windows Terminal right now, and we finally got it to work. Look at that. Boom. There's a segment that's showing you basketball data. Look at that cute basketball. The Lakers are playing the Bucks tonight in a preseason game. Their records are 0-0-0-0. It's preseason. Nothing counts. And here you can also see we've got the time that the game is happening in Eastern time and the date, which is today, the 15th of October. Um, Kind of just joking around here. This is an awesome new profile that we're going to build in this video. Later, I'll also show that this is going to start pulling in live scores. So let's see what that looks like. Look at that. Now we can also see a live game and score. So here the Lakers have got 11 points. The Bucks have 6 points. This is a great score. We love to see that. And this shows the amount of time remaining in the quarter. I'm going to hit enter once. It might update. Oh, there you go. It actually did update. So it happened to be at a time where it could update. Look at that. The score's even better. Oh my goodness. 14 points, 6 points. And you can see here the times updated. Now, this is going to update every like 2 minutes. That's what I've set it to. You can create your own profile, and I'll show you how to do all this stuff later. What I do want to do is just quickly reload a different profile. So I'm going to open this profile. I have called it Lakers .json. I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to change the team here just to show you can put in any team you want. So let's say DEN, that's Denver. I'm going to go ahead and just click save. And if I go back to the terminal, I think next time I click enter, it should just, there you go. Look at that. So the background colors I haven't updated for all of the teams. You could go in and change the colors yourself, but look at that. That's a game that's going to happen in the future. And when that game goes live, you'd actually go ahead and see all of the changes. So if that interests you, stay tuned. And I'm actually going to build this thing from scratch. Thank you very much. Hey everyone, I'm Jordy, and in this video, I'm going to be building that NBA segment that you saw in the previous clip from scratch. So if you're just interested in getting that working on your machine and you don't care about the process of building it and what that might look like, go to the description. I'll have at least a blog in there about how to go ahead and get it set up on your machine. There might be a short form video. But if you are interested in seeing actually how to build this thing from scratch, learn how you might be able to build your own segments for your terminal for whatever purposes, definitely stay tuned and we're going to jump right in. So what we're going to do is build an Oh My Posh segment. And so Oh My Posh is this awesome open source prompt theme engine for any shell. And so what's really cool about Oh My Posh is that it is fully portable, which means that we're going to build this thing. Right now I'm on a Windows machine and I'm running Windows Terminal and I use PowerShell. But if you're on Mac OS and you're running Z Shell, that's fine. We're going to build it one place. It's going to run anywhere, which is music to a developer's ears. And basically what segments are, what we're going to be building are these little pieces that show up in the terminal and give you some really cool, awesome functionality. And so here you can see, like, I believe this is a directory segment, and it tells you what directory you're in, gives you information. And then this one here, I believe, is just a Git segment. So we're gonna have a lot of fun. We're gonna talk about these different segments, and we're gonna build this NBA segment from scratch, which is pretty awesome. But before we go in and get to it, I do want to call out this amazing YouTube video that I watched, which is a little over 2 hours, but it is awesome. I'll link it in the description as well. And it's Scott Hanselman with Jan de Dobler. Jan's actually the creator of Oh My Posh and the maintainer of the open source repo. And what they did in this video is they got Scott's blood sugar to show up in the terminal, which is pretty awesome. Scott is diabetic and he does a lot of work in the terminal and he wanted to monitor his blood sugar. He uses this thing called Night Scout. And Night Scout basically, we can think of it as a REST API that is then queried essentially by Oh My Posh and gets the blood sugar and puts it into the terminal. That's what they built in this project. And that's sort of what motivated me to kind of want to do something like this. So here what I have are a couple mock-ups just so we all know what we're building towards. And if you watch the first clip of the video, it's going to look something like that. But here you'll see the team tri-code. So LAC is Los Angeles Clippers, GSW is Golden State Warriors, and you'll see essentially the date that they play. So what am I trying to say here? What we want to do is we want to get team information. So you tell me what NBA team you want to follow, and we'll see when their next game is. And then when the game actually goes live, what we're going to see is the information live about the game. And so here's SAS San Antonio Spurs against Miami Heat, and you can see here the scores, 19 to 15, and actually also tells you how much time's left in the game. So that's pretty cool. That's what we're going to be building. And what's cool about this is if you think about, the blood sugar example or these NBA scores, these are just cool things that you can put into your terminal, and we're going to get there in this video. So without further ado, let's jump right into it and let's start. Let's take a look at the code. So what I have done is I have already cloned the repo. Let's actually jump quickly back here and let me show you what that looks like really quickly. So here you can see Jan's Oh My Posh repo. All I did was clone this directly and open it up in VS Code. You will want to create a fork if you ever want to contribute. I already have a fork and I already have some code that we're going to leverage to make sure we stay on track and have something sort of functioning by the end of this video. That being said, you will want to create a fork. You can only create one fork at a time, so I didn't want to create a second fork, so I just cloned the repo directly. And any cool stuff we do in here, I'll push it to that fork and we'll make it all work. Okay, so here I am in VS Code. One really quick thing that I really like about this project is that it has a dev container set up. So you can see this folder up here is a dev container folder. And inside of that, you have things like Dockerfile and this dev container.json. And essentially, what you can do is you can create a container in VS Code that essentially takes all the goodness that you need to develop and what's recommended by the contributors and Jan in the community here. And essentially it goes and it gets all the extensions in VS Code that they recommend. So here I can already see this isn't something that I have in my normal VS Code life, but here you can see Prettier, which I believe is a formatting extension. So that's great. It gets all the code, like everything you need is basically just in this abstracted away container. It doesn't mess with the rest of your system. So before you go ahead and do this, you will need Docker set up, I believe, as well on your machine. Anyways, without further ado, I keep talking about segments. Let's go ahead and actually open up a terminal here and let's see if we have any goodness. Okay, give it a second to load. There we go. And you can see here that there is some good Oh My Posh goodness, and there are a few segments. Excuse me, that's not the one we want. Here we are. There are a few segments, so this seems like it's telling me something I actually don't know. Here's some more information. These are all just different segments, different blocks that we're going to be able to show into the terminal. What you'll notice is on my machine, I actually don't have any of that goodness yet, but I do in this VS Code, and that's because of the container. And so in the container, we're actually telling the terminal the appearance that we want. We're using Oh My Posh. That's pretty neat. And as soon as you clone and you do the same thing, this is what you'll see. One thing I do want to call out is that the command line's a little slow in the container. I'm not entirely certain what all of that is about, but I did see that slowness in the video that I watched as well with Jan and Scott, so I think that's okay. So let's jump into the code itself a little bit and let's try to understand how this thing is structured. There's two major pieces that we're going to be looking at, I believe, and these two pieces are going to be these .json files, which are kind of like profiles. Themes is what they're called in this project. And we're also going to be looking at .go files. So this is the Night Scout.go file. I'm going to take that same structure to build this NBA thing, basically. First, we're going to look at this profile. And you can see in this profile, there's all these things called segments. So there's a block in here, which is the segment block. And within here, there's all of these individual kind of JSON objects. And they tell us the type of the segment. And so here, this is a session type. And if you're ever wondering, like, what does that mean? There's really good documentation that I found, well, that they've provided. This Oh My Posh project has a lot of information. So we can always go to segments. We saw that one was called a session, I believe. So you go to session, and then it says it shows the current user and host name. I don't know exactly why the current user and host name is VS Code. Probably something to do with the fact that we're in a container, so that's kind of the host is my guess. But what we want to do is essentially be able to create a segment here that is going to be of type NBA, let's say, and we'll create our own segment. And we're going to do all of this again from scratch. So let's dive right into it. The first thing we want to do is there's this nightscout.go file. We're going to want to create our own file, and we're going to go ahead and we're just going to call it NBA, let's say nba.go. That seems reasonable. So here we go. Okay, so that's done. And then let's just copy this thing. I think basically we can recycle a good amount of the structure at least. So let's copy this guy. Ooh. Okay, I have really weird copy and paste behavior, I realize. Like sometimes I right click, sometimes I use Vim key bindings. I don't have any consistency with it. But anyways, let's take a really quick look. So now we have this code here. This is NBA.go. We're going to want to create an NBA segment, right? So it'll show up here in the terminal. This, I think, is the biggest part to look at. So let me get it here. Here we have this Night Scout struct. So that's from the previous project. We're going to make this an NBA struct. But basically what this is, it's going to give us all the stuff that we need to be inside of this segment. So this is actually like what's written here. It's the segment struct. So we're going to take this, we're basically going to gut this file so it meets our needs. This is going to be the NBA struct. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing things roughly more or less according to my roadmap so we don't get too lost on the way. But other than that, we're going to be doing this fully live. So here we don't need this guy. Let's get rid of this guy. We don't need this. Let's get rid of that. These two properties here, I've seen them in a lot of the different segments. So this environment gives us access to some environment stuff, I think some shared functions and functionality. And then this here is very important, this properties piece. So properties are basically ways, and if you have done React programming, I think this might be more familiar to you than it is to me. I'm not very familiar with React or similar. You can see here that we have, I hate these tooltips. They keep getting in the way of my zooming in. Here you can see the properties that we have. And so properties are basically a way within the profile itself. I can, as a user, when I build out the profile, right, when I build out this JSON file and I'm telling you what I want that segment to look like, I can pass in those properties. That's more or less what it is. And we'll get more hands-on if that was a little hand wavy. I think we'll get a little more hands-on with what that could be. But for now, let's kind of just gut everything else that we don't need. I know we're going to need some consts, so let's go ahead and let's just remove this, but we'll leave the structure for it because I think we need that eventually. Type Night Scout data. Let's just change this to NBA data. That sounds good to me. And then everything in here we don't need. None of this stuff is going to be relevant. What I will call out though is that this contains the API data. So we're going to do something similar when we look at the API, which I'll bring up in a second. But for now, we don't need this stuff, so see you later. Boom. All right, done. Okay, this next piece is very interesting. And so this is the template, which is the string. If I go to the profiles, you can see in here there's also a template. So as a user, if you know stuff that's inside the struct, inside this segment. So again, this is the segment struct. If you know stuff that exists in there, you can just go ahead and pull it out. So what's shown is essentially stuff from the struct. Or what you can do is within the code itself, we can get a representation for people here, known as the template. And so we're going to make our own template. So for now, since we just want something to work, right, we're gutting this. We just want to see something show up, our own segment. NBA segment is alive, let's say that. And so this is a string. It's just hopefully that's going to show up in one of the segments when we're done. Enabled, what enabled is going to do is when Oh My Posh is creating the segments, it goes to the segment that you have and it sees whether or not it's enabled. Basically, what we're going to do is if there's like an issue with the API or some set of conditions, whatever you want happens, we can disable this thing from showing up so it just kind of disappears instead of showing like a bunch of faulty information. For now, let's just go ahead and return true. We're going to revisit that a lot because we know that this enabled function is called when Oh My Posh is set up, so we're going to want that. Down here we have this get trend icon. I don't really care for this project, so let's get rid of that. Get result, we will want. And so get result is essentially the way, oh, and I see that this is not going to be happy with us. We don't want this to be Night Scout. We want this to be NBA now. Okay, so I do think we also want to do that for this. All right, cool. So get result is essentially the function that was called to hit the API. So since we're going to have an API that's going to tell us stuff about basketball, we are going to keep this. For now, just because we want to see something working, let's not worry about this. I'm also noticing that I don't have Copilot. So if you look at the bottom right, you can only see different things show up. I would expect to see Copilot there. I guess that wasn't part of the container definition, but I really like it, and I think it'll be fun to see it work. So let's see if I can get that to show up. Yeah, let's install this thing. Sweet. All right. Cool, installed. That was quick. And there you go. Now if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you can actually see this thing, which is pretty sweet. All right, so we got this NBA stuff. I think the meat of this, for now at least, let's go ahead and let's just delete all this stuff. We're gonna use similar code, I think, in ours as well, but for now we're just gonna delete it because I just want to basically get something showing. So we could do that. We could return nil. That seems kind of not fun. Sure, why not though? Let's do that. Yo, Copilot, that's fine. Cool, because we're not calling get result anywhere, so I think it's fine that this is going to return an error, basically, is what I'm thinking. And then the last thing is like this init, which is like the initialization. So we're just going to change this again to NBA here. Init, this will be nba.props equals props, and the environment equals environment. Okay, so now I think this is technically good to go. I'm going to save this. And one thing we do have to do, if we go to the docs on getting started, it'll describe a few more places in the code we have to touch before we can add. So if we go to contributing, we go to add segment, create a name for your segment. We have to go to segment.go. And since we're basically just taking this Night Scout stuff, let's go ahead and open segment.go. I'll do that here, segment.go. And I'm just going to search for Night Scout. Here it is. Here's Night Scout stuff. So we want to do this in alphabetical order, but I'm going to add the NBA stuff. Oh, nice. Copilot. There you go. Let's see what do you think? NBA writes the NBA scores. That's okay. NBA writes the schedule and live scores for your favorite team. That seems better. Copilot tried though. So that's one place I see Night Scout is in there. Segment.go. Where else? Is there any other Night Scout? Okay, what is this? I'm actually not entirely sure about that. Don't remember this part. Okay, cool. I think that's fine. And so here we have this new thing. I guess we're creating a segment. We're writing a segment, it looks like. Undefined segments.nba. You know what? I think I've actually been calling this NBA. I think that's the struct that I have. So if we go to that nba.go file, the struct here is this NBA struct. I think it's usually just uppercase word, but since this is an acronym, I'm feeling comfortable with this. If not, when we make the PR, hopefully Jan will review it and let me know, like, this is good, this is bad. I think that's good. I think that's all we need. I'm a little nervous that something's going to go awry, but let's go ahead and build it. Something I do have to call out that was really cool is that you can just build it by clicking this button here, this dev container rebuild. So there's this, essentially there's set up inside the container itself the ability to just quickly run commands that have already been pre-configured. So you see, I don't even have to know the build commands. It just works, which is awesome. So let's see if we get what we're expecting. I didn't see a change, but I realized I never changed the profile. And so what I'm doing here is I'm hijacking this profile, this Jan, this one here, this JSON file. There's a bunch of different ones you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen. There's a bunch of different possible files. Excuse me, that's not what I meant to do. There's a bunch of different possible files, profiles you can set up. In this case, we want the NBA one. Let's do that. NBA. Doesn't like that, but you know what? I like that. So let's see if that works. The cool thing about changes to the profiles is that you typically don't need to actually change the, you don't have to rebuild the code when you just make a change to the profile. But this still isn't working. It's still not happy. So let's see what it's not happy about. Okay, we have the type here. Let me go to segment.go. New segment type was NBA. That feels right. Let's go ahead and build it one more time. I think I didn't even see anything change there. I have a feeling this is going to still cause me issues. So now we get to debug together. Okay, so what I'm going to do is there's this really neat and handy feature set up already in the container, like everything else, called Oh My Posh is debug. So we go and do that. If I scroll to the top, NBA is true. So that is working. That's cool. I'm seeing that. So it is, the NBA stuff is showing. It's there. I'm just not sure why we don't see it. Why don't we see what we want to see? Return segment is alive. Okay. Go here. Aha. This is interesting. So here I have this template, which is .username, but I don't know that .username is anything inside of the NBA struct, and I think that's the issue that we're having. So here, it looks like maybe .username is just out of the box one of these things. Maybe it's in like the props or something that's defined, but anything we want to use to show up inside the terminal, like it's going to be in the struct. And so that's a good hint to me that I've made a mistake. The mistake here is that the user is defining a template, but we don't want the user to define a template. We want to define the template, and that's kind of what we have here. So now maybe a little redemption, maybe now that'll work. Let's see. Let me get back to view terminal. I need to remember these shortcuts as well. Okay, let's try it. We're gonna clear it out. Ah, there we go. Look at that. Pew pew. NBA segment is alive. That's cool. Sweet. And so that's it. That's the video. The NBA segment is live. Just kidding. I think that is pretty cool. If you wanted to just have some sort of text, I guess there you go. You could have text. But what we want to do is a little more complicated than that, right? Like we want to go hit an endpoint, API endpoint, and we want to do a lot of stuff. One thing that I'm thinking now that I'm here, we talked briefly about properties, and so here's an example of properties. What I do want to do is I want to be able to have properties inside of our segment so I can tell you what team that I want. So we should probably build that in, and I feel like that's a decent thing. Display mode emoji is not quite what I want. Let's call this team. And so like me as a user, I can tell you what team I care about. So I'm a big Lakers fan, so we're going to start with the Lakers. But if you were to get set up and you wanted to build, your own little segment, it's the NBA segment. Hopefully when that goes live, you would just go in here and you'd put in whatever, whatever team you want. But if it's not the Lakers, I don't know why you'd want to do it anyways. So I think that's good. Now let's go see if we can use that here. So now what I want to do is I want to make sure to include the NBA data inside of the struct. And so in the Night Scout, this is not right. Let's call this NBA data. I'm probably gonna have to go in and clean up all these comments afterwards, but that's okay. There's also these constants. Let's think about that later. Basically, inside this struct, I'm gonna make sure that it contains all the API data that we need. And so I've actually gone through and I've looked. I know we haven't taken a look at the API together, but let me just show you the API data that I think we're gonna use for this. Let's take this. Let's just copy and paste this. Okay, copy, paste. Cool. So this is the data that I think we're going to want. And so this stuff, we're going to get all of this from the API. And there's some information here. So like, for example, there's a game status field. But anyways, this is the stuff that we're going to want to pull in from the API. And because we have this structure embedded inside this NBA struct, we have access to all of this inside the segment. So remember, like this, at least the way I understand it, this is the segment itself. This is where all the stuff is for that segment that we want to display. And so we'll have access to all that. So now basically all we have to do is fill out this information. So we have to go hit the API, fill out this information, and then we'll be good to go. One of the props that we've passed in again, we're already passing in this team prop. So that's pretty neat. So let's go ahead and let's start thinking about how we're going to get that result. Maybe before that, let's take a look at this together. This is the endpoint that we're going to use. So let's copy that over. This is the endpoint that we're going to use, and we can see here that we have a bunch of different information. This is a huge, huge object, and someone's ringing on the door. I'm going to quickly just go ahead and answer that and pause this really quickly. I had to go get a package really quickly. Where were we? We're talking about the API. Basically, it's one big JSON object, and what you'll notice is the first key is meta, the second key is scoreboard, and the scoreboard itself is a big JSON object. And within that JSON object, there's another JSON object, inception, so on and so on. What I've learned is that in Go, you need to essentially, or maybe you don't need to, I don't know that much about Go, but a good way to handle getting API data in these JSON objects is if you know what the structure looks like, you build a whole bunch of structs, you go hit that endpoint, you get that data, and you fill out the structs with the data that you get from that endpoint. So I've already gone ahead and I've done that separately. I'm going to go ahead and grab that part of the code, copy it in, and I'll show you kind of what I mean. Hopefully it makes a little bit more sense. So let me just grab all of the different structs that we're going to need for this endpoint. Okay, I think that's all of them. All right, and let's put them in. So I'm going to put them in after the NBA data struct. How about that? Okay. So here you're going to see a bunch of structs. I just copy and pasted all of these. And all they are really is just ways for us to take that JSON information and put it into a Go object. So we can play with the data, we can get that data to show up. And you can see we're already making pretty good progress. So this is essentially all the different structs that we'll need. And I think we're pretty much good. There might be some errors, we'll go through and fix them, but You can see a bunch of different ones. Um, if you ever want, what I actually did to build this out before, maybe I could have done it live, it would have been cool. I copy and pasted the API. I went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, can you create all the Go structs that I would need? And it did it. So that would have been cool to have. That's what I did originally. Before I even started this video. I wanted to save some time, but I think that kind of could have been cool. Anyways, point is, we have all these structs. We're going to be able to get that information now. And now we have to go ahead and build out this get result. So we're making really good progress. So now we're going to fill out the get result information with the API that we are just talking about. And from there, we should be able to start putting in like real stuff into this segment, which is pretty interesting. There's some things with like caching and stuff I'll talk about in a bit. I don't know if we'll go into great depths about that, but what I think we're going to want to do is actually just build out the code to hit the endpoint. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to add a constant here. And we can just say this is the NBA endpoint, and we'll call it, no, I think we actually want to actually give like the endpoint itself. So I think what I'm going to do here is just call this NBA endpoint URL. Let's call it NBA score URL. And then this, now we're actually going to have this be a string, and we're going to have it be equal to, it's so interesting that Copilot has like an idea of what that endpoint could be, and I think that's a reasonable one. That's not the one we're going to use, but I think that's reasonable, which is like somewhat frightening. Let's go ahead and put this one in there, and then oh gosh, I forget a lot of different Vim key bindings. I want to be better at that. Okay, I think this is good. NBA score URL, I think that's nice. Okay, now let's go into the get result, and in here we're going to actually go ahead and call the right functions to get the information here. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste a little bit of code to make this save a little bit of time, because I think we are taking a bit of time here. So let me just grab some stuff and then I'll explain what's going on and we can chat about it. So let me copy this piece here and let me just paste that in here. Okay, so what we're doing here, we are doing an HTTP request. So the HTTP request is here. It's defined within this end inside the NBA struct, which we talked about a little bit before. And it takes in a URL. We're going to change that URL to the constant we just made, and it takes the amount of time that it's going to wait. So how long are you going to wait while you're going to hit that API endpoint? And I think there's some default amount of behavior. So we could just take out that default amount of behavior, but I think for our purposes, let's go ahead and probably we're going to want more time, basically. So this URL, this isn't the right URL. Let's see if Copilot knows. No, NBA score URL, that is the one we want. An HTTP timeout, we haven't defined that, so let's go ahead and define that. This seems pretty good. So this is HTTP timeout. That's okay. That's not exactly what we want. So what we want here, so this is saying NBA props. So this is using our props and get int. So we want to be able to pass in a prop. The prop that we can pass in is maybe HTTP timeout. And then, actually, you know what? Sorry, I think it did like this. Let's do it like this. That was bad. I went back to a different sort of format. I don't think that's what we want. That looks good. And then I think there's also properties default. Is that right? Default HTTP. Yes, I think that's right. So what this is saying now is I'm going to allow the user in their profile to say how long we want to wait. And that's important because I think this API is a little bit slower than some of the other ones used in the project. And if the user doesn't specify that amount of time, we'll use some default time. So I went ahead here, and I think in here we have it. You'll see this HTTP timeout. It's 1500. So I think that's milliseconds. So that's 1.5 seconds. That should work. Other things, this is debugging. That's fine. Let's just get rid of that for now. Excuse me. So now we're going to hit this endpoint. That's great. Now this is a really interesting part of the code that is copied over, and I want to talk about. When you go and get your endpoint, whatever endpoint you want, you can do this thing called unmarshal. So I was not very familiar with this. You might be familiar with it from other programming languages. But what it does is it takes this body that we got from our HTTP request and it puts it inside of the struct. And so what we have in here is a scoreboard response struct right here, the one that I kind of highlighted here. And inside of this, it's got all the stuff that we need. So we talked about this before. It takes all the information from the endpoint, it puts it inside the right Go structs, and it really helps us out. And so here, what unmarshalling does is it takes the string, the bytes actually that you're getting from that request, and it basically stuffs it inside of this variable, the scoreboard response, which is exactly what we want. Now, this is just error handling. Those tooltips are really getting me. This is just error handling. And I don't really want to debug just yet. We can re-add some strings if we want. So right now, this should work. It should go and get the information. It should put it in all the right structs. And now we should be able to take that information and actually work with it. So I'm going to copy and paste a little bit more code here. Copy this in. Paste it in. All right. And so what I've just added here is a bit of code that is going to basically take this NBA data. So you'll recall we have this NBA data struct. Let me just really quickly go to that. This contains the API data. I think I should fill out this comment a little bit better. This contains the API data that we want to show in the segment itself, right? So this NBA data struct actually appears here as well. So NBA data, it's embedded inside the NBA struct, which is the segment struct. Whoa, interesting. Whoa, okay, wasn't expecting that. Let's see if I can get this thing to work the way I want it to again. Click. Aha, segment struct. Okay. So anyways, the NBA data is going to be inside of this struct. That's great. And then what we're doing here inside of this function is we're filling out all of this information, right? We're getting all the stuff that we want to put inside the struct. We're just going in and grabbing it from the API. And so all these different things, they're just fields that are in the API. There's nothing special to it. They're just fields in the API. And if you scroll through the API, you can see a bunch of those fields. Now, one piece of the code that we're missing, I'm going to copy and paste this one in as well. It's this idea of finding the game by the team try code. And so what we're doing here is we want the user again to be able to put in the team that they're using, right? Or that they want to follow. So in theory, this could be the Lakers, but it could be any other team, right? Any other team. And we want to go through the scoreboard, the live scores. We want to find the actual game that the team that you're looking for belongs to. And that's what this piece of code does. And this team name is actually something that I might want to include in here as well. The team name we have to get, and is this. We don't want it to default to the Warriors, not at all. But what we do want is we want to grab the props, we want to grab the team name. So in this case, it'll be the Lakers. And we want to go through, and here you'll see, we're going to go through all of the different games. That does make sense. We can do that. Go through all of the different games and make sure that we're just returning the one game info that we care about. And so the scoreboard response is this thing. It has a member of it called scoreboard, and then within that, it's got all the games. We're just going to parse through all of those games. And so I've already written this function as well in the interest of time. So let me copy and paste that guy in. Let's go ahead and paste this guy in. Okay. So what this does is it parses the NBA API response. It looks for props.team in away or home team. I guess this is props.team name now, I believe. Yes, team name. Okay. Well, I guess it's props.team as well, because in here we define it as team, but we just label it as team name in the code. That's okay. So here what we do is just a function. We'll go over the meat of the function here. These tooltips are really getting me. It takes in an array of games, and then what it does is it iterates through all of those games, and it tries to see, it says, hey, is the team tricode, I guess, is that either from the away team or the home team in the game? And if it is, it'll actually give us that game, it'll return the game. Otherwise, they'll say, nope, we didn't find any team. We didn't find any game, we didn't find any game for the team. That's what this does. That's looking good to me. So now that we have this, I think in theory, I'm going to get rid of this debug as well. I think in theory this should work. So all this stuff, we do need to return something. So let's return perfect Copilot. What we're returning is this data piece. Okay, so what's happening? What is get result? Let's just really quickly double check what this is doing and make sure I'm on the right track. So get result is going to get you the HTTP request. It's going to get you the response. And it's going to put in that information into NBA data. And then when we have that, we're going to basically be able to use this inside the enabled. I think that's what I want to do. And something that we talked about, I think, briefly before is that enabled, this function here, this is called every single time by Oh My Posh for a segment to say whether or not we actually want it to show up. So if it has bad information, has bad data, we just don't even want this segment to show up, for example. So enabled is called. And one thing that we can do is we can check, and I'm going to also take this code in the interest of time. I'm going to take this code and copy and paste it in. Here we go, paste that in. It's going to take this stuff and it's going to get the get result. So it's going to take the data, we call get result, which is great. And then what we're going to do, I don't know why this is angry at me, but we'll fix it. We are going to, why is it angry at me? Get result is unused. Get result is unused. Data, start data. I don't think that's true. I think we're going to save this. It's going to go away. Look at that. It did. Okay. So basically what we're doing here is we're getting the data from get result, the NBA data, and then we're saying that this segment, this instance, right, this segment here, that version of NBA data is actually equal to this data here. And so now the segment itself, which we've talked about a bit, the segment struct itself has all that goodness. It's got all that data that it needs. And that we just did inside of the enabled. And this is the same flow. Like if we look at nightscout.go, this is not like an original me thought. Let's look at enabled. This is essentially the exact same stuff that they did, right? So just kind of copied that over into NBA.go. Now, one thing that'd be cool is to see if this is actually working. So we don't want the NBA segment as alive. I feel like that is no longer, enough for us to see if we've gotten what we want. So what we want maybe is just to have like the away team show up, and we'll just say verse, and we'll have the home team. Maybe that'll be good. And you can see the way that I'm doing this is with these two curly braces on either side. That's just a convention that I saw elsewhere, so nothing original there. So now what we're going to want to do is when we build it, I'm expecting this NBA segment is alive to no longer be stagnant. It's actually going to be data from the API, and it's going to look to find, are the Lakers inside of this scoreboard API? And if they are, it should show up. So let's rebuild by clicking that button again at the bottom. Build, build, build. Close. Does it work? Oh, no, it doesn't work. So why isn't it working? It's a great, great question. What we're going to do is call Oh My Posh debug, and we're going to take a peek. So let's see. Oi. So it's got, you can tell here, I don't know actually why this is, but it's getting all of this stuff. So definitely reached the endpoint. So that's interesting. Then it has an error, battery, connection refused. I don't think that's about ours. Maybe that's a different segment I'm not using. So it actually is going ahead and pulling out all the information. So that's really interesting. Like it did get stuff. So where could we have gone wrong here? Let's just go ahead and check the profile. HTTP timeout, we've put it to 1.5. That seems good to me. In the HTTP timeout here, let's see. Does that look right? I'm just going to double check with some of the other code. Properties.http timeout, that feels good. That's HTTP underscore timeout, HTTP underscore timeout. Okay. And let's clear this. So again, what I'm noticing is that the segment itself is not enabled. So somewhere this enabled thing that we've been talking about is actually showing false. So if I look for enabled, this is somehow showing false. I'm not sure why that would be the case. So let's see what we have here. Find games. This is squiggly. Is it unhappy? This is a good debugging situation. So this is get string team name. And here do we have team name? Oh, this is team. I think maybe this is wrong. I think I'm not getting the right name. That is my guess now. I think team name might be wrong. Yeah, this is not right. I messed this up. This should be the actual prop, I believe, right? Team name, something like that. But it's not showing up. Let's see. I don't have it in the const yet. So this is a constant, the team name. And this is a properties. Dot properties equals team name, but this is actually just team. Okay. I think that makes sense. I think that should fix it. Properties dot property, it's a single property, team. Okay, let's try this now. I think what was happening before is I basically had a little bit of misspelling in there. So let's see if that fixes it. Yes, there it is. Look in all its glory. LAS, LAL versus MIL. Okay, perfect. Great. And so now we've basically done everything. The rest of it is about formatting. And so the formatting we can do, we can change the background and the foreground colors. So since we're talking about the Lakers, let's go ahead and do just that. Let's find those colors. Let's add them in. We'll change them. That'll be great. And then basically everything else, I don't know if I want to go directly in the code exactly how to do it. I think I might just copy over some of the other stuff. But I think that's pretty much everything we need. Like this is everything from the API. And I think we're pretty good to go. Except, except now that I think about it, we didn't really talk about caching or anything like that, which I think is kind of a shame. So the idea that we haven't really talked about is, well, every single time, like I did say this is slow because of the container, but every single time you go and hit that endpoint, it's going to be slow. And like we don't want it to be slow every single time when we're actually working the terminal like on a day-to-day basis. Because right now, all three of those clicks that I just did, I clicked enter, all three of those things went and hit the API. So we actually want to cache that information because when the Lakers are playing Milwaukee and we get the schedule and the things and this like that doesn't change. So I'd probably want to cache it for like an entire day. Now, when we get the actual score, that stuff changes and we can choose how often we want to cache it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some more code. I'm going to copy and paste it in the interest of time. I don't think any of this stuff is too interesting for us to build together. So what I have here is I added this code here. This is get cache value. And what it does is it gets from the cache the value based on the key. So we'll pass in a key. There's based on this property, that .env property, it has a cache built into it, and we can cache stuff. We're going to get that based on the key, and then if we find something, we just essentially return this NBA data. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cache this entire struct, this entire thing. We're going to cache that. And there's two different ways that we might want to cache, right? We're going to want to cache in the case where the game hasn't started yet, and then we don't want to update the cache very often because it's very stale data. But then we're also going to want to cache when the game has started, and we do want to update that. So we do want to put that in here. And so for that reason, I'm going to copy and paste a couple more lines of code here. Let's paste this in here. So I'm having two different cache keys. I'm going to have a key for the schedule, and I'm going to have a key for the score. So that's two things that we want to do. And this caching stuff, I think it just depends on like the behavior of the endpoint that you're communicating with. But let's copy and paste a little bit more stuff. Let's copy this one in and paste this in. And basically you can see here now I'm also getting these timeouts. And so how often do you want the cache timeout for the score? How often do you want the cache timeout for the schedule? This looks good to me. So we have 14,400 and we have 2. So basically 14,400, that's the number of minutes in a day. And so for the schedule, I think that's reasonable. I don't think that games change so often within a day. So when we get that time and stuff, we're just gonna, every day we'll go and try to find the next game for your team, but I don't think we're gonna do much more than that. And then here for the score, right now I'm gonna default to 2 minutes, but I'll also have a property called cache timeout. You can have it be whatever you want, I think is kind of what we're getting at. So it'll default to 2 minutes. If you set your own cache timeouts, if I hover over this, you can set as a property cache timeout and you can make it less. I just don't know what that behavior is going to mean. I think you're going to basically see a lot of slowness. So that's kind of not ideal. Okay. And then the last thing I'm going to do is, let's see, these lines here. And then I think we're pretty much good. Let's add these in. Team name, this stuff. Okay, HTTP timeout. Okay, I'm gonna add this in here. So here, essentially what we're gonna do, time. Do we not have time? Okay, let's make sure we have time here. We do not have time. Time, save. Okay, so I needed to add time as a package because we're gonna do a lot of stuff with time. Basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna check first to see if we should check the cache. So if cache schedule timeout is greater than 0, that means that we want to check the cache. And essentially we're going to call get cache value on the key, and we're going to see if we can't get that value. Then what we're going to do here, this is pretty interesting, we're going to parse the time, the current time, or excuse me, we're going to parse the time from the cache. So this is the data that we're getting, right? We're getting data from the cache, and this data has this thing called start time UTC. We're going to parse that, and that's the start time of the game. If we get that, then what we're going to do is we're going to check is now, the current time it is right now, is that after the time the game was supposed to start? And if it is, then we want to delete this because now we know the game has started. From the scheduling perspective, we don't care about scheduling, we want scores, right? So we're going to delete this. Otherwise, we're going to return the data because we don't want to go and hit the endpoint. Now, in similar fashion, the cache score timeout is a pretty similar idea. So we're going to get the cache value of the cache score key. And again, the cache score key is, I think this is just part of the, yeah, this is part of the function. So here it is. 1 and 2. And so this is saying the key that we're going to have in the cache, basically. For the cache score timeout, what we're going to do is just see if we can get the value. If we can, then we'll just return the data. Basically, if there's something in the cache for this thing, then we're just going to return it. Otherwise, we know we have to go get it. So if we get to this part here, if we get to line 198, essentially, that means that there was nothing in the cache that we were interested in, and we're going to go do the request. Let me click save. Hopefully that's good. We're going to do the request, and we're going to kind of continue like what we had before. And then other than that, I think everything else is pretty good. Let's see. I have a couple things. Okay, I'm going to add this in as well, just so we're really everything's kind of cooking and we can see all the glory. A few things I added in here. So basically, if the game status, so the game status tells us 1 means it hasn't yet started, 2 means it's in progress, 3 means it's done. If it's not within that range, just let me know that something's wrong. Then, in theory, we just want to make sure we actually set stuff in the cache. So that's what we were missing. So if we've gotten information, go ahead and set stuff in the cache. You can read this code in a little more detail. Because of the length of the video, I'm kind of going a little quicker now. But let's just build this and make sure, first off, that it builds. And second off, after it builds, let's change a little bit of stuff to make this look really cool. So let's see what happens here. Okay, cool. So I didn't see any errors. You still see this same thing. So let's change the template itself. That's the last thing we need to do here. This template is cool, but it's not the template that we want. The template that we want, let me try to find it here. The template that we want is going to be something like this. Copy, and let's paste it in. Gosh, you can see, like, I haven't used Vim in a while, so I'm so unused to using the shortcuts. Here we go. So this, some things I do want to call out in the template now. The template itself allows you to do conditionals, and essentially this stuff you'll see in the behavior of the template is just checking to see, like, if the game is yet to start, then I want to show the game date and the time and stuff. But otherwise, if the game has started, meaning it's either in progress or it's complete when you go and hit the endpoint, let's actually show the scores. That's pretty much what's happening there. So let's save this. Let's build it one more time. All right. And then let's see what happens. Boom. All right, look at that. So now you can see here we have the Lakers. This is their record. They're playing Milwaukee. That's their record. And this is the time and date at which they're going to play. Now you are seeing here that this guy is not showing up. So in the first clip, you saw a little basketball. In order to see basketballs and stuff like that, you need to have nerd fonts installed. And I'll explain how to do that in the blog. And I'll also link to Scott Hanselman has a great video on how to get like nerd fonts and stuff set up on your machine. So in the interest of time, I am going to cut it there, but I will show a clip during the game that's going to happen tonight at 7 p.m. It's currently close to 4 p.m. for me. At 7 p.m., I will show a clip of this thing working in action for the Lakers game. But I hope that was helpful. Give me some feedback if there's stuff that you think would have been more helpful for this video. And thanks for watching if you made it this far. Well, some terrible news in this update. Look at that. We have the final score, and it's not what you love to see as a Lakers fan. The Lakers scored 97 points, and the Milwaukee Bucks scored 108 points. Not a great game, I'll be honest. But the end result here is that we've gotten all this information into PowerShell in Windows 11 for me. But once again, this thing is fully portable. So you can go and add any information you want for any team as long as it's found in that same API. You can go tweak the code and add it and make it look the way that you want it to look and feel. I wish the result were a little bit better for the Lakers, but at least for us now we know how to go and add information in the terminal for our favorite NBA teams. My next steps are going to be to actually create a PR for this thing on the Oh My Posh repo. I'm going to work with Jan. Hopefully he'll review that PR and let me know what things I need to tweak and fix. And then hopefully this will go live. And at that point, I'll probably put together a video of just how to get set up with Oh My Posh generally and create a few profiles, and that'll be a much shorter video as well. But thank you all so much if you made it this far. I really appreciate it. Once again, this is my first video, so let me know if there's anything you think I should do differently, things that you liked, things that you didn't like. I really appreciate it, and have a good one.